You want wealth? Very well. But remember, everything has its price, a price you would never want to pay.
Once upon a time, in a small, peaceful village nestled among dense forests and winding mountains, there was a place that seemed to be forever wrapped in serenity. It was a village where the laughter of children and the chirping of birds intertwined to create a gentle harmony. But hidden deep in the mist, secrets lay waiting in the shadows, mysteries that would soon be revealed. In this quiet village lived a poor but loving couple named Lala and Kofi. They resided in a humble little home, small, unadorned, yet always filled with laughter and the warmth of joy. Layla had a gentle smile, the kind that could melt anyone's heart, and Kofi was a strong man with hands roughened from years of hard labor. Together they had 3 lovely daughters, each as beautiful as a budding flower, and they were the pride and treasure of their parents. Life for Layla and Kofi, though filled with love, was far from easy. Every morning, Kofi rose before dawn, took his tools, and walked to work on the fields of others, his back bearing the weight of exhaustion, just to make sure his family had enough to eat. And Layla, from morning till night, was busy washing clothes for others and hauling water for wealthier villagers, her delicate but determined hands never resting. No matter how hard they worked, life remained a daily struggle. Every night, as Kofi gazed upon his sleeping daughters, he could not help but feel a heaviness in his heart, whispering to himself that he had to find a way to give them a better life, a future brighter than the poverty he and Layla had always known. Under a sky full of stars, the couple would sit hand in hand on their little porch, dreaming of a life without worries, a tomorrow where their daughters would not lack as they had. One day, Kofi awoke with a strange sense of unease. Something stirred within him, a call he could not fully understand, a whisper that now was the time to act, that he had to find a way to change his family's fate. I have to do something. I must, he resolved. And so he decided to seek out his friend in the neighboring village, a man who just might have the answers he'd been searching for. Early the next morning, Kofi set off down the narrow path leading out of the village, his heart heavy with worry but filled with determination. The sun had just begun to rise, casting light through the leaves, illuminating the trail covered with dry leaves. Yet even the warmth of dawn couldn't chase away the sense of unease bubbling inside him. Deep down, Kofi knew this journey might be the turning point he and his family had waited for, but a strange shiver ran through him, a faint intuition that something unforeseen lay ahead. Kofi's destination was the neighboring village, where his friend Musa lived, a man with deep knowing eyes that seemed to see beyond the ordinary, known by many as a skilled healer. When Kofi arrived, Musa greeted him with a mysterious smile, a smile that never quite reached his eyes, yet gave Kofi a strange sense of comfort. Musa invited him into his hut, a place filled with the pungent aroma of herbs and shelves lined with countless bottles, more like a world of magic than one of reality. Kofi poured out his troubles to Musa, the hardships his family faced, the sleepless nights filled with worry, and his simple dreams for his 3 daughters. He spoke of his willingness to do anything to change their lives, so his daughters wouldn't grow up in deprivation. Musa listened closely, his eyes fixed on Kofi, as though he could see straight into his friend's soul. After a long silence, Musa nodded slowly, his deep voice filled with a strange power. I understand, but you must know to gain everything, sometimes you have to give up what you hold most dear. Kofi was stunned, trying to grasp the meaning of Musa's words. He asked, What do you mean? I'm willing to do anything, but I won't harm my family. Musa only gave a faint, cryptic smile and replied, There are prices no one wants to pay, but if you truly wish to change your destiny, you must be ready to face all the consequences. This answer left Kofi even more confused, but in Musa's eyes, he saw something indescribable, a look that was part empathy and part warning. Then Musa slowly pulled a small packet of black powder from his pocket. Handing it to Kofi, he said, This is the way. You only need to mix this into your children's food. They won't be in danger, but your life will change forever. Kofi took the packet, feeling its weight in his hand, as if he were holding a dark fragment of fate itself. But the thought of a better future for his daughters pushed him forward, and in that moment, he made his choice. A choice that would change everything, forever. With the packet of black powder in hand, Kofi returned home, his heart heavy with confusion. Each step along the narrow path felt like a burden, and he couldn't stop wondering if he was making the right choice.
Between the laughter of my daughters and the weight of gold, I chose gold. But at what cost?
But then, images of his 3 daughters appeared in his mind. So innocent, so pure, and he knew he couldn't bear to see their future overshadowed by the same poverty he had endured. "It's just a little powder, it can't cause any harm," Kofi whispered to himself, trying to silence the rising unease in his heart. That night, in their dimly lit kitchen, under the flickering glow of an oil lamp, Kofi quietly sprinkled the black powder into the eldest daughter, Amara's bowl of porridge. As the strange powder dissolved into the food, the atmosphere around him seemed to grow heavy, almost suffocating. A sudden gust of cold wind swept through the house, rattling the windows with an eerie creak, as if it were an ominous warning. Kofi shivered but pressed on, determined to finish what he had started. The next morning, the family gathered around for breakfast. Amara sat there, carefree and laughing, her bright eyes sparkling, blissfully unaware that her fate was about to change forever. Kofi sat across from her, watching silently as she ate each spoonful, his heart clenching tighter with every bite she took. Part of him wanted to stop her, to erase all traces of the powder, but the thought of a brighter future for his family held him back. That day, as the sun rose high, something strange happened. An unusual powerful wind swept through the village, whistling like dark whispers. Leaves spiraled across the ground, trees swayed violently, and every window in the village rattled, as if nature itself was furious. The villagers looked up to the sky, murmuring in confusion about this eerie occurrence. But Kofi knew, deep in his heart, that this was no ordinary wind. That night, Kofi was jolted awake by a terrified scream. He rushed to Amara's room, only to find her sitting on her bed, staring blankly into the darkness. She cried out, "I can't see anything. It's all dark, Father, so dark." Her words felt like a dagger piercing Kofi's heart. He stumbled, barely able to stand as he realized what had happened. Amara had lost her sight. She was paying the price for his decision. Kofi turned away, hiding the tears of guilt that filled his eyes. He had hoped that this ritual would bring no harm to his daughter, but now it was all too late. A shadow of fear crept into his heart, yet he tried to console himself, convincing himself that this was just a trial, and that it would ultimately bring good fortune to his family. And then, in the stillness of the night, a knock echoed through the silence, shattering the uneasy calm. The knock on the door shattered the quiet of the night, startling Kofi. His hands shook slightly as he stood frozen for a moment, gathering his courage before moving toward the door. When he opened it, a strange man stood before him, cloaked from head to toe in black. The man stood motionless, his eyes hidden in the shadows beneath his hood, his gaze cold, piercing as though it could see straight into Kofi's soul. A chill in the air seeped into the room, making Kofi's spine tingle with fear. The man said nothing. He simply raised his arm slowly and placed a large, heavy sack on Kofi's doorstep. Under the faint light of the moon, the sack sparkled, revealing a glint of metal. As Kofi looked closer, his heart raced. It was gold. Bright, shining gold coins filled the sack, more than he could ever have imagined. "This is your reward," the man said, his voice raspy, cold, like the whisper of wind through a cracked door. "But remember, this is only the beginning." Though brief, his words echoed like a chilling warning. He looked at Kofi one last time before turning away, disappearing into the night as if he had never been there at all. Kofi stood there, staring at the sack of gold, his eyes filled with disbelief. Thoughts swirled in his mind, a mixture of joy and dread. Could it be that everything Musa said was true? He wondered, looking down the path where the man in black had vanished. But soon he convinced himself that this was the opportunity his family had been waiting for, to escape the chains of poverty. He dragged the heavy sack inside, the sound of gold coins clinking together filling the quiet air. a mesmerizing sound, yet filled with a sense of danger. Layla awoke, seeing her husband with the sack of gold, her eyes wide with shock. "Kofi, where did this come from? Is this a dream?" she asked, her voice trembling, laced with both wonder and fear. Kofi nodded awkwardly, unable to find the words to explain. He couldn't tell her the truth about the black powder and the dark ritual. "This is fortune," he lied. "We have waited so long, and now our prayers have finally been answered." But deep inside, his anxiety grew as he recalled the words of the man in black. This is only the beginning. And indeed, it was just the beginning of a terrifying series of events that Kofi and Layla could never have anticipated. From the day that Sack of Gold entered their home, Kofi and Layla's lives began to change. They repaired their shabby house, bought items they had only ever dreamed of, and even new clothes for the entire family. Their daughters were overjoyed, as if the days of poverty had become a distant memory. To the villagers, Kofi's family now appeared dazzling, a far cry from the image of struggle they once knew. People murmured about their sudden good fortune, admiring them with a hint of envy. Yet, deep down, Kofi remained haunted by what had happened to his eldest daughter, Amara, since that first ritual. She could no longer see the world around her. Her eyes were blank and lost. Though Layla believed it was just an unfortunate accident, Kofi knew the truth. The guilt lay over him like a dark cloud, shadowing his every thought. 2 years passed, and a life of luxury had become routine for Kofi's family. But then, on a cold night under the full moon, that familiar knock sounded on the door once more. Kofi froze, his heart pounding as he moved toward the door. As he had feared, the man in black stood there again, silent, gazing at him with those cold, knowing eyes. "It's time for the next ritual," the man's raspy voice echoed, devoid of any emotion. Kofi wanted to refuse, to say that he had had enough, but those eyes held him speechless. "If you refuse," the man said, "everything will be lost, and you will pay with your own life." Kofi felt trapped between two dreadful choices. He looked over at his daughters, seeing Amara's hollow eyes, and realized he had no escape. Helpless, Kofi accepted the man's demand, taking the terrifying packet of black powder once again. This time, the ritual was meant for Layla, his second daughter. The next day, after the ritual was complete, Layla could no longer hear or speak. She looked at her parents with confused eyes, her mouth forming silent words, but only an eerie silence filled the room. The family's horror grew, yet Kofi hid the truth from Layla, repeating only one short phrase: "It's fate." But within Layla, doubts began to grow. She started noticing a strange connection between their daughter's afflictions and Kofi's secret trips to the neighbouring village, as well as the mysterious appearances of the man in black. Could the wealth they now enjoyed be tied to a terrifying secret? She wondered, her heart filling with dread. Yet still she dared not confront her husband. She only knew that something was deeply wrong and that she needed to find out the truth. In the days that followed, Layla's suspicions grew relentlessly. She couldn't stop thinking about Amara's sudden blindness and Layla's unexpected loss of speech and hearing. Both were inexplicable misfortunes. It felt as if she were living in a nightmare from which she could never awaken. Meanwhile, Kofi grew increasingly strange and secretive, avoiding her gaze and giving vague answers whenever she asked about the man in black or the source of their family's newfound wealth. One night, unable to bear it any longer, Layla decided to follow her husband in secret. She waited until Kofi left the house, giving a vague excuse about business in the neighbouring village, then quietly slipped out and trailed him at a distance to avoid being detected. Hidden in the shadows of the dense forest, Layla crouched behind bushes, steadying her breathing as she watched Kofi enter the hut of the mysterious healer, Musa. She waited, and as the door creaked open, Musa's voice drifted out into the night. "Are you ready for the final sacrifice?" His voice was low and rough, yet each word seemed to carry a haunting curse. Layla held her breath, straining to hear Kofi's reply, his voice shaky with fear. I can't harm my youngest daughter. The other two have already suffered too much." You knew this from the beginning, Musa interrupted, his gaze sharp as a blade. If you refuse, not only you, but your entire family will pay the price. This wealth has a cost, and you agreed to it. Now, there is no turning back. Layla stood frozen outside, her heart pounding. All the misfortunes her daughters had suffered, it was all because of Kofi, because of choices he had hidden from her. She wanted to scream, to burst in and confront her husband, but terror and despair held her back. She turned and ran home quietly, tears streaming down her face, her heart as heavy as if it were weighed down by a boulder. Back home, Layla couldn't look at her children without feeling her heart shatter. She realized she not only had to face the truth, but also had to find a way to protect her youngest from the so-called final sacrifice. But how could she? She was alone with no one to help, and this secret was too dark to share with anyone. Layla knew she had to act, and she began to form a desperate plan. A plan that would reveal everything Kofi was hiding, even if it meant risking her own life. That entire night, Layla couldn't sleep. The words she had overheard between Musa and Kofi echoed in her mind like a curse she could not escape. She watched her children sleeping soundly, especially her youngest daughter, the only one still whole, able to see, to hear, and to laugh. No, she told herself, her heart swelling with resolve. I won't let her suffer as her sisters have. I have to do something. The next morning when Kofi returned, he looked weary, his gaze evasive, his face marked with deep worry. Layla looked at her husband, her heart filled with bitterness. She kept the secret of what she had overheard, and instead, she began planning to confront the man she once loved, the man who had now become the cause of all her family's pain. The following day, Layla decided to go to Musa, the healer her husband trusted blindly. Standing before his hut, her heart burned with disgust and anger. She stepped inside, her eyes resolute, facing Musa directly. You can't keep doing this, she said, her voice trembling with fury, though she kept her composure. Musa smirked, his eyes cold and unfeeling. Do you think you can change any of this? He asked, his tone full of challenge. Your husband has already agreed. Your family made a pact with me. This is the price you chose. Is there another way? Layla asked, fighting back a wave of despair. Is there any way to save my daughter's life without another sacrifice? Musa looked at her for a long moment, as if weighing a decision. After a long silence, he gave a twisted smile, a grin filled with malice. Fine, he said slowly, his voice chilling. There is another ritual, but it requires endurance and sacrifice from you. If you truly want to save your last daughter, you must perform this task every day. You must lick the wound on your husband's leg, a wound I will create. And if you speak of this ritual to anyone, all will collapse and your daughter will pay an even greater price. Layla felt a wave of cold sweep through her. The thought of having to perform such a grotesque ritual made her want to scream. But then, the image of her daughters flashed in her mind again, and her heart softened. She knew she had no other choice. She would do it for her children, no matter how dreadful the cost. With a heavy heart, she nodded.
I won't let them suffer. Not my daughters. No wealth is worth their lives.
Musa's smile grew cold. He called Kofi over, and with firm hands, he made a deep wound in Kofi's leg. Layla watched as her husband winced in pain, and then she began her grisly task, the ritual she would have to endure every day to protect her children from a cruel fate. The days that followed became an unending nightmare for Layla. Each dawn, she was forced to perform the vile ritual, bending over the deep wound on Kofi's leg and licking it until the blood and infection seemed to seep into her very being, all to keep their wealth and protect her youngest daughter from Musa's curse. The nauseating taste of blood and pus invaded every sense, making Layla feel as though she was no longer herself. Gradually, her body weakened, her eyes grew dark with exhaustion, and each step she took became heavier. The villagers began to notice the change. They whispered when Layla walked by, avoiding her as if she carried a curse. Layla herself saw that she had become a mere shadow of who she once was. The children of the village no longer ran to her for stories of fairy tales. Instead, they turned away, some even wrinkling their noses at a strange odor they couldn't name. Loneliness blanketed Layla like a dark fog, yet she endured it all, for her youngest daughter's sake. Kofi too saw Layla's growing frailty and felt a pang of sorrow, yet he remained silent, doing nothing to ease her suffering. His mind was torn between fear and guilt, a burden he could share with no one. Wealth might have arrived, but the house grew more oppressive each day, as though every gold coin carried with it a sinister curse. The laughter that once filled their home had vanished, replaced by a stifling, suffocating silence. Then, one day, the village elder and the council gathered. They decided to visit Kofi's family, to inquire about the strange changes they had observed in Layla and her daughters. When the group appeared at the door, Layla stepped back, her eyes filled with worry. Kofi, however, stood to face them, struggling to maintain a facade of calm. "We have heard about what is happening to your family," the elder began, his voice stern. "The entire village is concerned about these strange occurrences. Can you explain what is going on?" Kofi shook his head, his voice rough as he tried to sound composed. "It's just an illness," he said. "Layla will recover soon. There is no need for concern." But the elder was not easily deceived. He watched Kofi's evasive gaze and the anguish in Layla's eyes. "We do not believe it is merely an illness," he said, his tone weighted with authority. "If you do not tell us the truth, we will have to investigate. The people of this village have a right to know what is happening to one of their own." Kofi felt trapped, cornered, his heart racing with fear. The elder's words rang out like a warning, a sign that all his secrets were on the verge of being exposed to the light. Under the pressure from the villagers, Kofi knew he could no longer hide the truth. Finally, he confessed to all his sins, his voice trembling with shame and fear. He spoke of the black powder, the dark rituals, the mysterious man, and the greed that had led him down a cursed path. The villagers listened, horrified and outraged, unable to believe that Kofi would dare use his own children in a ritual to gain wealth. At that very moment, a miracle occurred. His eldest daughter, Amara, suddenly regained her sight, her eyes slowly lighting up with joy. Layla, who had been deaf and mute, began to hear and speak again, her voice breaking with joyful sobs. Although the villagers breathed a sigh of relief at seeing the girls healed, their anger toward Kofi remained undiminished. The village elders looked at Kofi with cold, unforgiving eyes. "You traded your family for gold and silver, and now you must pay the price," the village elder declared. With no other choice, Kofi fled the village in desperation, disappearing into the depths of the forest, never to return. Layla, though she hadn't directly committed the acts, had remained silent for too long. The villagers decided to banish her from the village as well, leaving the children in the care of the community. Kofi and Layla's daughters were finally raised within the loving arms of the villagers, freed from the suffering their parents had caused. The story of Kofi and Layla became a lesson passed down through generations. The villagers retold it as a warning: never trade the love and purity of family for the empty glitter of wealth.